This is the Tree of Life, Season 11, Chapter 3. In this episode, we will be talking about how the migration of dissonant spaces reflects the phenomenon described in much earlier podcasts as appropriation. Dissonant spaces can migrate linearly, that is, within the linear path of an actor. Or they can migrate laterally, that is, from one individual to another. Lateral migration occurs through a substitution event within a more convoluted path resulting from an intersection. Let me explain. Suppose you were a regular smoker for 10 years. Suppose for a moment that you quit smoking a few days ago. But something in particular has triggered you and you felt a craving. You had the impulse to go to a corner store to buy a pack. But a few steps into your journey, you changed your mind, decided not to buy the cigarettes. But you went to the corner store anyway. Once there, you purchase a jug of milk and some sweets. Immediately after you, some other guy walks into the store and buys cigarettes as you're leaving, the exact same brand and type that you would have bought were you still a smoker. What has happened here? To be clear, this type of glitch is the type of glitch described in the Advanced Glitching book in the complete series. In effect, you have had an impulse, acted upon it, then changed direction at the last moment. What follows in the convenience store is called appropriation, or migration of the dissonant consensuality. Let me explain why. Smoking is, for you, an act of negation. You smoke as opposed to doing something else. That is, for you, smoking creates a dissonant consensuality for you. But, as you chose not to smoke, you chose to follow path parsimony. Now, as part of this dissonant consensuality, there is a lower, more convoluted path to your action, where a hybrid structure is created within the dissonant space. Because you chose path parsimony, another actor took your place within the dissonant space, further to the substitution event. That is to say, the dissonant space associated with the substitution event migrated, or was appropriated, by the second actor. But, what is interesting about this, is this reveals a few very important things about the 9 levels to every intersection, and the formation of a hybrid structure after the fact. First of all, it tells us that if person A is the convenience store clerk, person B is you, person C is the second individual buying the cigarettes, a hybrid structure is created with respect to 2 dialectical impulses, affirmation of one and negation of the other, for you, and the reverse, for person C. In that hybrid structure, person B, you are on the left side of the structure, with impulse 1. Eating the sweets, affirmed, and impulse 2. Smoking negated. Person C is on the right side, with impulse 1. Eating the sweets, negated. And impulse 2. Smoking, affirmed. But it also shows us that when you follow path parsimony and create a dissonant space too far in advance of execution of an impulse, the result is a substitution event occurs early enough for appropriation of the impulse. This is the impact of a priori negation. In other words, the convoluted path represented by the version of you which purchased the cigarettes is a complete substitution event, one in which you coexist on the same linear path with your replacement. This proves that our argument in Season 10, Chapter 9 must be modified somewhat. That quantization of consciousness within path parsimony can only exist in the present due to a priori negation within the past. But, yet, it remains true that the resumption of time parsimony can lead to what I will call the perfection of a substitution event, through that very same negation. Which is to say, that a priori negation doesn't just negate an impulse in one person, it produces splitting of perspective into 2 vessels within the same spatial space. In other words, in previous episodes we discussed how a substitution event within a convoluted path, associated with a dissonant space, produces a hybrid structure, which causes displacement events. Well, this displacement event displaces the convoluted path into path parsimony for the linear individual. But at the same time, the hybrid structure that it creates is a new structure, arising out of a new intersection, which is displaced as between the two interacting individuals onto a third individual. In other words, it is not the impulse which gets displaced exactly, it is the intersection. What begins as a more frequent intersection between persons A and B on the convoluted path becomes an intersection between persons A, B, and C in the same spatial space. All of this proves, first of all, that quantization of experience exists primarily in the past, but may also exist in the present, due to migration of a dissonant space, or appropriation of the impulse underlying that negation. Whereas, the future belongs to unity of consciousness, created by acceleration of intersection resulting from the 9 levels to every intersection, and the resumption of time parsimony through nonlinear displacement events. That's the end of the podcast for today.